Welcome to Elevate Pod, where we elevate your mindset, inspire your spirit, and ignite your leadership journey. This podcast is brought to you by Elevate Leadership Services. My name is Pearl.
And I'm Chiwechungu.
We are the co-founders of Elevate Leadership Services and the hosts of Elevate Pod. The Elevate Pod is dedicated to inspiring and empowering listeners, focusing on minorities and immigrants. We offer valuable tools, resources, and pathways to foster personal and professional development.
Thank you, Pearl. Today we are so excited and we are also honored to interview Reverend Dr. Sandona Gorman Ashley, who is going to share her remarkable journey, her experiences, her thoughts and insights on rethinking leadership, a strategic framework grounded in faith. In a world that moves faster and demands results, many leaders feel pressure to separate their professional identity from their personal beliefs. But what happens when faith becomes the foundation rather than the background of leadership? Today, we are going to be exploring how faith-grounded leadership shapes decision-making, builds trust, and creates organizations that thrive not just in results, but in purpose. So before we drive in the conversation, let me give you the rich bio that Reverend Ashley shared with us. Reverend Ashley is a trailblazing leader with over 27 years of ministry in the Presbyterian Church within the U.S. She is the denominational first Black woman to serve as a synod leader, a historic milestone that marks her as a powerful example of leadership, resilience, and progress for women and people of color in faith communities. Her distinguished ministry includes roles such as senior pastor, associate for gender and racial justice, associate for leadership development, manager for core process support and teaching elders ministry, executive presbyter, and leader of the synod for the Northeast, the largest synod by geography and presbyteries in the Presbyterian Church. Reverend Ashley has consistently broken barriers and led with courage and innovation, and some of these include becoming the first Black woman president of the Association of Mid-Council Leaders, abbreviated as AMSCL, serving as the first Black Art of Transitional Ministry Education Consortium president, which is abbreviated as TMEC, being the first Black woman faculty member in major Presbyterian Church in the U.S. leadership formation programs. She is a leading voice in ministry. She introduced the core and fit competency model for the Church Leadership Connection in 2013, aligning pastoral cause with theological and leadership compatibility. She also developed strategic tools for committees on ministry focused of financial stewardship, discernment, and best practices in governance. As the leader of the Synod of the Northeast, she leads a high-performing diverse team rooted in trust, collaboration, and shared leadership. Under her guidance, the Synod has cultivated a forward-thinking culture that leverages modern technology, compelling visual storytelling, and strategic communication to expand engagement, deepen community impact, and amplify its mission. Today, it stands as a national model for governance and ministry innovation. She served as an appointed representative in Wilmer, Minnesota. Reverend Ashley holds a doctor in ministry from Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, a master's in divinity from Johnson C. Smith Theological Seminary, a certificate in organizational design from Cornell University, and a Bachelor of Social Work from Georgia State University. Her ministry is rooted in faith, renewal, hope, and it aims to make the gospel message transformative for today's world. She shares a life with her husband of 39 years, Reverend Murphy Ashley Jr. She is the mother of Jay and a proud grandmother of
Yes.
Christian, Olivia, and Izumi. I hope I pronounced Izumi's name properly.
Okay.
So, Reverend Ashley, do you have anything you can add to this rich bio of yours?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much. What an honor it is to be invited to be a part of this conversation and to meet you in this particular way, and for the invitation of sharing a little bit about my journey and my story. It's a blessing. As I listen to you read my bio, it takes me back just to look at how far and how gracious God has been,
Praise God.
and all the people who've allowed me to stand on their shoulders and those who have encouraged me along the way. I'm extremely thankful for all those individuals and for this opportunity to hopefully inspire other people that this journey has its own uniqueness, but there's such opportunity today for people to be able to fulfill their dreams and what they would like to do in life and their sense of call. And so I hope a part of what we do here is to share that story as well. That opportunities are there and space is being provided around the table for more people to step into these leadership roles. And it's just about being ready. And so I want to talk about that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We appreciate you and thank you.
Thank you.
How about you, Pearl?
All right. Thank you again. We're so glad to have you. And we can't wait to hear the rich insight that you have to share with us today.
Thank you.
Leadership is rarely simple. It involves difficult decisions, uncertain outcomes, and constant pressure to perform. But for many leaders, faith offers something powerful. It offers clarity, it offers perspective, and even a deeper sense of responsibility. In this conversation today, we'll explore how faith informs leadership, from navigating conflict to building cultures rooted in integrity and service. So we'll go straight into our questions and discussion for today. So, Reverend, my first question to you is, when you think about leadership through the lens of faith, how do you define it? And what distinguishes faith-grounded leadership from traditional leadership models that focus primarily on authority, performance, or results?
Mhm. Thank you. This is a question that I love to answer. One is leadership. What is leadership? It is an art, it's a skill. There are some people who believe that leaders are just born. There's something that folks come here with, and they have this special something inside them. And leadership is something that can be taught and something that could be learned. And it is an art in itself. One of the things that I often think about in scripture is that leaders were rarely the people that the the leaders were people that individuals never would have chosen. They would have never chosen David, chosen Mary, the mother of Jesus, Deborah, all these other leaders, Esther, Moses. Moses talked about his impediment in his speech and others. And so the scriptures say that when David was chosen, one of the things that happened in First Samuel was that the words were, God looks not on the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And I think when we're looking at leaders today, often people will look at the outward package and will try to size leaders up in that way. And what God looks at leaders is availability, a willingness to be obedient, also for those who are teachable. And I think when we are looking at who are leaders today, people also know the limits of their own individual power. So when I think about my call going back 27 years, I never imagined being in the roles that I was blessed to be able to serve in, nor that I imagine going to school for social work that it would end up being adjudicatory for a Presbyterian church. Never imagined it. Um, However, the readiness that I think was over the years, I learned that God does give us certain gifts, and we have the opportunity to be able to use those gifts in particular ways. I also think that a part of leadership is learning. And so not only do you have gifts that come your way, you have some natural gifts, you have things that you've learned along the way, some experiences, but you also are to perfect the gifts that you have. So to spend some time really honing in on what are the things that you do best, what are the ways that you find joy? If you don't have some joy in this work, you'll stop doing it. Or it becomes just a burden to you, and you're not able to really be any good to yourself or anyone else. And so I'm very thankful every day I wake up, and I am thankful that I have the privilege of doing this work. And I call it a privilege. And so, leadership, in many ways, we'll talk more and I'll get into some more specifics, but I really do want people to understand is yes, sometimes you see the twinkle in someone's eye and you see something there and you go, oh, there's something about that person. And so, yes, that's there. But that's not enough. You've got to have people who are your mentors, people who are nurturing those gifts. My metaphor for ministry is being a midwife. And I really think about what does it mean to inspire, to help to birth that which is already within others. And so let me stop there because I could talk about this a long time, but I want to just get us started.
Yeah. What I hear from you is leadership of service to
Hmm.
save others.
Yes.
Wonderful. But when we lead, we also are faced with moments when we have difficult decisions or high stake decisions that we have to make.
Hmm.
So, from your perspective, how does your faith shape the way you evaluate the options that you consider? How do you assess the risks and that you're going to take?
Yeah.
And how do you determine the right course or the action to take?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. One of the things that leaders are faced with all the time is situational leadership and situational ethics. And how do you manage all of that? And one of the things that I would say is that if you want to be successful, just in general, you need to be collaborative, especially when you're making difficult and hard decisions. But even before talking about collaboration, for me, I begin with a place of prayer. I begin with prayer. I also ask myself several questions. Am I willing to fall on the sword for this particular thing? What is it requiring of me? What does decision require of me? What does this decision require of others? What will it mean in the long run? I also ask, do I have enough information to make the right decision? And so I pray, I research, I seek wise counsel, and I try to allow those things to be consistent in my process for making decisions. I also use a tool of scenario planning. What happens if we make this choice? What will happen if we do not make this choice? Um, so that whole idea of having some type of tool to guide us in making decisions. But I think for me, I realize that we are in a place in our country where people want quick fixes for things that have been very problems that have been around a long time, complicated problems that there are no easy answers to fix. And so leadership today really helps people to be able to deal with what is. So the coping skills that we are able to model and provide and to lower the anxiety goes a long way. If you are anxious, you're not going to make the right decision. So we talk about, what happens back here where you're talking about your reptilian type decision that we make, those knee-jerk decisions where you haven't had a chance to really process them and to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And sometimes we're in situations where you have to have a quick response. And you may not have the chance to follow all the process of seeking advice and doing all your research. And I think that's true. And at those times, I think you've got to go with your gut. You go with your gut feeling to say, in this particular situation, I'm going to make the best judgment decision that I can make. And if I make an error, you are hopefully honest enough to go back and to say, I'm sorry, let's let's change, let's make a mid-course correction if necessary. But I think the values around decisions, when I make decisions, it's not just a personal decision. It has to be for the greater good. And so looking at how will this impact others, impact the work that we're doing, for me, as far as it looking at our mission and our vision, does it align? If, do these things align? And if they do not align, what needs to be done in order to make those alignments work so that we are working towards some common good? If a decision only benefits me and mine, I need to be very careful to make sure that I'm not making a selfish decision. And I think that that's so easy to do when you're in certain roles because you have the power of the pen or you have the power of the pulpit or whatever it might be, you have the influence over others. And so you have to be very careful with that amount of responsibility because with authority comes responsibility. And how do you hold the two in tension? And I think being a person who tries to ground their decisions in prayer goes a long way. I often, I've never had the experience that Solomon had, where God said, "What would you like, Solomon?" And Solomon said, "Give me wisdom, give me grace." And God says, "Okay, because you asked that, I'm going to give you this and plus this." But I often pray that God give me a discerning heart, that God would give me wisdom, that I am acting in ways that model as a person of faith. So I hope that there's a pattern that people can follow and see that if you're going to work with Sandana, she's going to be a person who will be honest with you, that you'll see integrity out front, that you will do truth telling, if necessary. But I think that those are the things that guide me. And I had good teachers. I want to say this as well. My grandfather, he would always share, I only had a sixth grade education, is what he would say. I had a sixth grade education. And one of the things that he would say is that everything that's shining is not gold.
Yes.
You can't believe everything you read and everything that you hear. And he had these old wisdom sayings that I still hear. My grandmother too. Um, they, I sat at their feet and listened to them. I grew up with older relatives and just sitting and listening to the life experiences. And I just know that that wisdom carries. And so it's a combination of things that help me. Can I sleep at night after this?
The decision. Yeah.
Yeah, thank
I,
you.
I think that's a good question you pose. If I make the decision, can I sleep? Can
Hmm.
I live with this decision that I made, or did I take all the things into considerations? Because the impact is not about you; it's the people that is going to impact, and
Yes.
will it impact them positively?
Yes.
So
And that
thank
whole
you.
idea, can you sleep with it? Do you
Yeah,
have a conscience about it?
yeah.
Are you having to sell your soul in order to make this
A
decision?
decision.
We
Yeah.
talk about, falling on the sword, but
Mhm.
the reality is, what do you have to give up?
Yes. Yes. You're
And
giving
many
up.
things today require that you give up a little bit of yourself in
Yes.
order to make certain things work.
Yes.
And that's something you have to really make some decisions around. And in these leadership roles, there's always the temptation to
Yes.
sell out who you are,
Yes.
um, to forget who you are,
Yes.
and
Yes.
whose you are.
Yes.
There's always that temptation.
Yeah. And it's the easiest way. I think it's the easiest way, and I think it's the expectations of
Yes.
that. So and then it boils down to an individual, as you said, what do you value?
Hmm.
How are you going to sleep
Yes.
with the decision you make? Yes.
I really I could talk about this for a while because I hope this doesn't discourage anyone. I do work for the church. Uh, but some of the same things that you experience in corporate life, you experience in the church,
Yes.
especially when you are on the administrative side. And so sometimes people will say, you've got to play to stay. And oh, I don't. I don't have to play to stay. And so this whole idea of if you want to be in these roles, if you want to be able to have this influence or whatever, you've got to play our politics. And in the church, you have just as much politics in church life as you have in other places.
Yes.
What can be very disheartening is if you forget that the church is made up of human beings and you forget that, you could become very discouraged in these roles because people can over spiritualize the realities. And the realities is that we're still judicatories, we still are fiduciaries, we still are administrators, we still have groups of people that we have to work with. Some are kinder than others, some are more reasonable. You have many people. There are 962 congregations in the 8 states that I support. As you can imagine, they're very different.
Yes.
So today I'm here in New England, and New England is totally different, much more independent than New Jersey or even New York State. And so when you're trying to resource, you have to be able to resource very broadly And there are a lot of things that could be trigger points in one place that won't fit culturally in another. And there are a lot of times that if you are, making assumptions around needs, around expectations, you can really miss what's really the important parts for people, and also what will really have a good impact. So I went off a little bit there, but all of these things are a part of leadership. It really is negotiating the room and being able to, you have to have emotional intelligence. And
Yeah.
so that whole idea of self-management and self-regulation and being able to manage relationships as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wow,
Thank you.
you just gave a foundation for my next question
Okay.
Yes.
with your last statement. So,
Mhm.
in today's fast-paced world or results-driven culture, what external pressures make it difficult for leaders to remain anchored in faith-based values such as integrity, humility, and service? You mentioned emotional intelligence. I would like to hear how all of that plays into this question.
hmm So for me, really, leadership has a lot to do with the management of self and really understanding your strengths and your weaknesses, being vulnerable enough to admit your limitations. Those things are hugely important. I often tell people what leaders do sometimes is that we focus on what we're not good at instead of focusing on what we are good at. And I've used a number of leadership assessments in my work in helping to work with executives and others who are doing vocational discernment. And I like to use tools that not only highlight what you're not good at, but to tell you, here are the 5 things or the 6 or 7 things that you're really good at. Work those things and do that and see if that doesn't give you space to be able to really put some things in place that you would like to be able to see actualized. So that's the first thing. But I think also when we talk about the managing of relationships, is understanding the importance of being collaborative. So the answers that we need today, I think when I looked at my staff, when we come together, we all have different levels and different experiences, but that table becomes a think tank because everyone around that table has something to contribute. And the perspective that people bring gives us a better product in the end. And we have a number of people who are just intuitive. I love my office administrator. One of the things that she can do is you can give her a report and she'll read that report, and things you've never seen, you've missed it, never thought about it, she can spot it. And I appreciate that and value that gift that she brings. She'll also ask discerning questions. And one of the things when we talk about leadership today, leadership is about asking powerful questions, asking the right questions, not about just having the right answers, but can you ask questions that help people to go deeper? And to understanding what actually is going on. And so when we talk about reading the space, reading the room, managing of relationships, it's whether or not you truly value people. Do you value diverse perspectives? Some people say that. But in actuality, you get to a meeting or you get to a presentation, whatever it may be, and we say we want to hear you, but all the answers are already there. When you truly value people and that management of relationships, people hear honestly, Chipway, I really want to know what you think about this. How does your experience, how does that influence the lens that you bring to this? And a posture of learning is can you listen well enough to be able to hear underneath what's underneath the story, underneath the words, and do you really care? And I think so when you're talking about emotional intelligence allows you to really show up in spaces where there is sincerity, where there's open space to be able to really have dialogue and to seek input, and then to be respectful. Even if the opinion is different than yours, you still believe that there's value in hearing what that person has to share because they're coming from their place of their experience and the lens that they bring to whatever is happening. So that's something that I would share has been a learning for me as far as being able to utilize emotional intelligence. But the self-regulating helps me not to act too quickly. And what I would have to say about that is that sometimes as leaders, what we do is we gauge the temperature of the room. And I would also say we gauge the readiness of the system to move forward. There often is a desire to move in one direction, but the readiness may not be there, and that might mean you don't have the people in place or the resources in place, whether that's financial or the skills, the capacity may not be there. And so it may not be the right moment. And so, how do you deal with the idea of people when they are ready and hurting and need answers, but it's not the right moment? How do you have people to be okay with that? For me, during this season following COVID has been probably one of the most challenging of times for churches. Decline for many churches was happening before COVID. Okay, COVID just amplified what was already in place. But the other thing that COVID did for many leaders is the pressure to say, we've got to fix all of these things, where in many ways our hands were tied. And it didn't matter how much knowledge, really didn't even matter how much resources you had. You were paralyzed by this national, global pandemic global pandemic. And I think it really made people feel disempowered. People were vulnerable. There was lots of loss. In New York City alone, there was one congregation that lost over 68 congregation members because they were all first responders in this congregation. And I have friends that lost spouses and close relatives and all of these things. We probably all have had people like that. And you were in a situation where you felt that you could do no more. So what could you do? And so one of the things that leadership teaches us is the ministry of presence, timely words, those who care for the soul, those things where you really are looking at speaking on behalf of God when we're talking about religious leadership. But the other is the public roles that we have as leaders. And for me, as a religious leader, what role do we have in the public sphere? And so for me, it's showing up in that space as an advocate for justice, making sure that the resources that we use for mission are not just satisfying one individual church, but that the community itself is impacted, bettered. If we have a church and it makes no difference that they're on a corner, I don't know if that's a very healthy church or very vital church, because it doesn't matter what size you are. If you're not impacting the community around you, then there's something missing there. So I don't know if I answered your question, Pearl, but those are the things that really on my heart when I think about these things.
You know, you have
Very
touched,
well.
yeah, your answer has touched a lot of questions that we may have. You've touched on the integrity, you've touched on teachability, you've touched on having the emotional intelligence so that you can scan the room and see how we do respond as leaders. And not being selfish in terms of serving our goals, but being of service for others. And because of time, I think I'm going to jump maybe from some of the questions because you've touched them in different ways. But one of the questions that I would maybe like to ask is pertains to actually when leaders can avoid to be of self-interest. So, how would you encourage a leader to not to have that pride or not to have that self-interest so that they can serve others? So, what practices or disciplines can help those leaders remain anchored or remain self-aware and avoid decisions driven by their ego or their complexity rather than the purpose?
Yes. So one of the things that I want to say, I talk about old wisdom a lot.
Mhm.
I remember being young, and people would say there's three things that leaders need to be very careful about. One is power, the other is money, and sex. And they would talk about it, power, money, and sex. And they become the temptations for people. And so to really make sure that you are clear around your own areas of weakness and that you find support. So I have a professional coach that I meet with monthly. I've have a group of people that I would say are my sounding board who will tell me the truth. I have this same group of people that hold me accountable, and I process with them to make sure that, I'm staying on track. You've got to have some accountability partners in this work. And for decisions that we make, as well as being human. As you aspire and you go up the ladder, as you make more money, as you have more prestige, as you can buy better this, better that, the temptations are there. They're going to be there. So, what do you do with that? One of the things that my grandparents would say is that you do not want your self-worth to be about the clothes you wear, how much money you have, the car you drive. People want to know, are you real? People want to know where your heart is. And so if those are the things that are important to you, not the I like nice things just like anyone else likes nice things. I like nice things. Um, I like a well cared for house and yard and those things. You want to be able to have a decent vacation, and that's not what I'm talking about. But is that where you find your value? Is your value in those material things that will pass away? And for me, I've seen enough in my life to know I'm 60 years old. And I've seen enough in my life to realize that those things are fleeting. So what remains? So faith remains for me. Um, Being a sister means a whole lot to me. Being a friend, being able to hold confidences, having a spirit of hospitality and generosity means something to me. It means something to me that individuals feel like they can talk to me. And when they talk to me, they feel like they're being heard. I love being a mother, a sister. I love being a wife. I love being a wife. And it means something to me to know that a part of my values is being able to care for my household. So that those things are values for me. I also think about now I've come from a family of seven siblings, and we're all still alive. And I'm very thankful for that. But we're now the oldest in our families. Much of my family has older family members are deceased, and I have nieces and nephews. And I wonder who they see when they see me and my sisters and my brothers. Who do they see? I hope that they will look, look at me, look at my life, look at my struggles. Not a perfect life, not a life they've had with that didn't have struggles, because I've certainly have had my struggles. I've had my regrets. I've made my mistakes. I've been able to get up again and do things many times over. I've had many no's and I've had many yeses. And all of those things make up your story. And so, what I tell people all the time is not everyone that gets to hear my full story, but when the time is right, I am open and honest in sharing my journey, because I believe is not putting forth this perfect picture of everything always being right, never making a mistake is what inspires people. I think Jesus met people where they were and gave people an opportunity to change and to transform their lives. And that's my story. And so for me, when the time is right, I welcome answering the questions about my struggle as much as I answer questions about my successes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I think we have one more last question before we end uh, this wonderful podcast. And I think it has been wonderful and great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
All right. So my last question is, when you think about the long-term impact of your leadership, what do you hope people will remember?
Mhm. I hope that people will say that she loved God, and that she loved people, that she's a person of faith. I hope so. But I hope that very soon I can stop saying, I'm the first this, I'm the first that. It's 2026, and it really is time for more leadership, more women being able to serve in these various roles. And it is a struggle every day to be in these roles, because the roles were not made for us. It's still, in many regards, a male centered work that we're doing and called to do, and patriarchal in many ways. And so every day it's showing up in this space and saying, how might I model a different form of leadership that is invitational? And so I hope that I have to say this because we didn't talk a lot about this, but I'll be very brief. I hope that people would say that she's a strategist and a visionary. I want to emphasize that because you don't do this work without being a strategist or a visionary. You have to have a body of work where people are willing to follow your leadership. So you're not a leader if nobody's following. But the other part of leadership is seeing the possibilities, being able to envision far in the future, being able to put foundations in place that can be built upon. And so those things I hope would be a part of my legacy. as I continue to provide leadership to our denomination, but leadership to others. So organizational change and organizational leadership and moving systems and shifting systems so that you can have greater impact is hugely important. And so that has been around storytelling, creating new narratives, reframing of narratives, really being better stewards and using good fiduciary wisdom, understanding investments and how they work and how to best utilize and maximize investments, and doing that in partnership with others. Some who may have more knowledge, but bringing all of that together so that what we do put together is something that is sustainable and long lasting. So I hope that what people will say about me is that she did those things, um, made promises that were kept, had vision, and knew how to implement. And I hope that that would be a part of my story.
By saving others.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. We have come to the end of this podcast, but you gave us a lot of information
Thank you for
for
having
our
me.
audience to hear from somebody who has made so many milestones in our life, but for somebody who leads with faith behind her, and for somebody who knows that prayer can guide you and direct you in whatever decision that you want to make,
Yes.
because it offers discernment. And I think that is very clear, that we can be able to remove ourselves and save others
Yes.
by just bringing that faith towards us.
Thank
But
you.
you also gave us examples that our organization of faith are not immune as well, because they all have bodies of human beings that
Mm-hmm.
are the ones that are carrying forward the work that we do.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
Well, thank
So
you for having me.
you're welcome. So as we close, we see that leadership that is grounded in faith isn't about having all the answers that we have. It's about walking the unknown with integrity, choosing service over self,
Mm-hmm.
and letting timeless values guide you in each and every decision that you make.
Yes.
When you lead from that place, or when we do lead from that place, our
Mm-hmm.
impact outlasts any single victory that builds a future defined
Yes.
by courage,
Mm-hmm.
by
Could I
compassion,
say,
and by
yes,
hope.
yes. If I could just say one thing, one last comment, I think this is critically important. You have to believe in yourself as
Yes,
well, and
yes,
believe in the goodness of God in your
yes,
life.
yes.
I have to say that because in these roles, self-talk, looking in the mirror, speaking in to yourself, saying that if God called me, God equipped me
Amen.
uh, to do this work. It's it is so necessary. And so thank you for what you're doing in the ministry that you have and the encouragement to women all around and to others, just leaders in general. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. So we just hope that this topic, to our viewers, we hope that it has enlightened you, and it will continue to enlighten you, so that our or your leadership will continue to be purposeful and driven by the values that you hold, the values of faith and the values of service.
What a wonderful discussion. If there's one takeaway from today's discussion, is that The most sustainable leadership is rooted in purpose. We've heard about self-leadership, the importance of emotional intelligence, asking those difficult questions. When leaders commit to values like trust, service, and stewardship, they don't just build strong organizations, they cultivate environments where people truly flourish. Thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you for joining us on this journey to elevate and inspire. Until next time, lead with purpose